Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Happy September. My name is Angie Barker Jackson, and I am the Vice President for Institutional Advancement here at Berkeley School of Theology. We are so delighted you have joined today's First Friday Lunch and Learn session. If you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, we'd love for you to do that. And as we were joking earlier, no matter where you are or what time it is for you, feel free to enjoy a meal or a snack during this time. That's, of course, why we call it Lunch and Learn. This series is sponsored and planned by the Alumni Engagement Office, which is part of the Advancement Division here at BST. Melissa LeBeuf, who's co-hosting with me today, is the Assistant Director of Alumni and Donor Engagement. She'll be monitoring the chat through the presentation, so when you get opportunities to ask your questions, she'll be tracking that and facilitating that. And as always, Melissa is your source for information about future First Fridays as well as alumni events. And we've got some exciting things to share with you at the end of our time together today. Thank you, Melissa. These Lunch and Learn have been designed with three purposes in mind: learning, connecting, and being. Each month, we feature a different topic and a new guest, and our hope is that the topics will stretch and challenge our minds, that we will connect and reconnect with others in the BST network, and that this will be a space of radical belonging. It's officially a new academic year here at BST. Classes began on Tuesday. Thank you for joining us for this program as we all reestablish the rhythms of the school year. Today's special guest is Reverend Rebecca Irwin-Diehl, PhD. As founding director of American Baptist Home Mission Society's Center for Continuous Learning, Rebecca is committed to being a fellow learner, to practicing action reflection, and to ensuring that all Center for Continuous Learning offerings are useful for the strengthening of God's people, the renewing of minds, and the transforming of God's world. A practical theologian, she wants learning to have real-world relevance and life-changing applications. She's passionate about learning from books and other media, from listening to and interacting with people as individuals and in community, and from immersing herself in hands-on experience. Rebecca holds a Master of Theological Studies from Palmer Seminary at Eastern University, one of our sister schools, as well as an MA in Theology and PhD in Theology from Villanova, where her research focused on lived spirituality, especially among those who are religiously disaffiliated or call themselves spiritual but not religious. As you can hear through her bio, Rebecca is passionate about lifelong learning, especially equipping leaders and other disciples for ongoing faith formation and spiritual growth. And that's the driving force for today's topic and her presentation. Welcome, Dr. Rebecca Irwin-Diehl. We look forward to learning with you today.
Thank you, Angie and Melissa, for helping me with the technology today. It's great to see some familiar names and faces. I don't know that I have met all of you, but it is an honor to be with you today. I'm actually filling in for a colleague of mine who recently departed the CCL, as we affectionately call ourselves, for the American Baptist Churches of Massachusetts as the Director of Development there. And once again, I'm in the wrong view. But Jennifer Sanborn was planning to talk with you about learning with older adults. She recently completed a certificate in older adult ministry. I'm taking a little spin on that since I did not do that certificate, but a lot of the information I will be sharing today will draw on what we know about learning adult learners. So you've already started to drop in the chat where you're zooming in from. I'll invite you, if not to put in the chat, then at least to be thinking so that you can kind of contextualize yourself in relation to the information I'll be sharing. What kind of learning do you pursue yourself? Because my assumption is if you are a theological educator, you are someone who is passionate about learning in a lifelong way. Do you prefer formal or informal learning? Do you like doing it in a small group, or are you more of a go to the library, bury yourself in the internet, doing your own online searching and watching videos? Do you prefer online or in person? We know post-pandemic that uh, online learning is a huge gift as well as new challenge for us as educators and facilitators of learning. So, what kind of learning do you like to facilitate? Some of us don't mind learning online ourselves, but we don't really love teaching online. Um, it's a new format, right? Um, some of us really want the synchronous experience. We want the live call and response of the classroom. Others are perfectly fine recording the lecture, maybe interacting asynchronously on a discussion board or via assignments. Some of us are focused very much on doing skill training, real world tools for accomplishing tasks and work. Others are more interested in sharing ideas and information. Um, all of these types of learning and teaching um, come into play when we think about how we learn and how adult learners engage with information. So, I had a professor who was an expert pedagogue, and she always emphasized for me and for us the importance of setting the stage, laying the table. So, what we're going to learn, or perhaps relearn, about fellow adults in the learning environment are first of all that what we get from Knowles. I'm maybe mispronouncing that. Knowles, probably Knowles, now that I'm thinking about it. In the 70s and 80s, he was writing about adult learning theory, the term andragogy. He wasn't the first to coin it, but he was the one who kind of brought it into prominence, and he contrasted it with pedagogy. Now, what's really important to understand about the difference, which has sort of fallen out of vogue, is that Knowles wasn't necessarily talking about methods for teaching. He was talking about how adults approach learning. Children tend to approach it as feed me, feed me, Seymour, right? Um, they want to receive information from the adults. Although even Montessori teaching is becoming more learner-centered with children as well. But adult learning theory looks at how adults approach learning and how they engage in it in ways that are different from children. What we will actually explore is the many ways in which every learner, no matter what age they are, learns differently. And that is related more to methodology, the ways that we process and integrate information in our lives. So we're going to look at some different theories of learning and maybe even learn how we learn ourselves in order to um, be better teachers of others. So this is a great sort of visual of the key principles, the 5 key principles of adult learning theory. Um, Malcolm Knowles talked about self-concept, readiness, motivation, experience, and orientation. I've provided the website there. I'm happy to make these slides available, Angie and Melissa, if you have a way to post them. But don't worry if you can't capture all this information. We're going to go through them one at a time. But I just thought this was a great visual graphic of the different principles of andragogy. Um, because adult learners approach the learning project differently. So first, adult learners come with a very distinctive self-concept. Um, we know that we're not entering a classroom as a blank slate. Even if the subject matter is new to us, we come to it with our own experience and past information that we allow to intersect with a new topic. We aren't just passive receptacles. While there are certainly learning experiences still that are the traditional lecture hall where you have 200, 300 students in the room and they are just furiously taking notes. I'm doing this, now they're doing this, right? I still take notes longhand, uh, which shows my age and perhaps some of my learning styles. Um, Adults also perceive that they're self-directed on their learning journey. They're here not because it's compulsory education, but because they're on a path, they're on a pilgrimage, they're on a journey to accomplish something in their life. And learning is part of that, and they want to be agents in their own learning experience. So they are independent decision makers. They appreciate options. So, example. For the first time in, I believe it's now my 7th cohort of teaching a kind of intensive Baptist history, identity, and polity course for our Baptist ordination candidates across American Baptist life. I have 3 essay assignments. Very traditional academic requirement, way to assess how much they're learning, how much they're not learning, what I may need to do differently. For the first time, I'm going to give them an option, and we'll see how it goes, pray for me, of submitting a video essay. I don't know that it's going to be a time saver for me in a larger than usual cohort, um, but does give them the option of processing their learning in a different way. It's an experiment for me, but I'm trying to implement some of my own learning about adult learners and see how they receive that as an option. Second principle of adult learning theory from Knowles is experience. Adult learners come with something to offer. Again, it's that we're not passive receptacles, we're not blank slates. We have something to offer. So I will very intentionally say to my cohorts, I look forward to learning with you because I have as much to learn from them as they have to learn from me. They're bringing diverse experiences and knowledge to the learning community. They have already formed ideas and beliefs that they bring to the learning experience. Um, and that's something for us to keep in mind, right? How many of us have been in a classroom where a hand will shoot up in the Zoom or in live and in person and say, that's not how I learned it, or my pastor explains it differently, or this particular theologian approaches that topic from a different perspective, or in my culture and in my upbringing, we were exposed to a different perspective on that. Um, this is a really rich opportunity for us with adult learners. And if we're not prepared for it, it can be a huge stumbling block to us as educators and facilitators. Um, Part of the experience that adult learners bring are also skills in problem solving and critical reflection, not something we expect to see from children in the classroom, right? Um, Not all folks will come with a very Western Eurocentric approach to problem solving and critical reflection, but everyone has some approach to it. And one of the learning theories we'll look at a little bit later in my presentation is particularly interested in how intelligence may be understood as how we solve problems. And we see a lot of that diversity showing up in adult learners in a way that we may be less attuned to it in children who are learning. Um, the other experience they bring is that they apply values to the knowledge. The knowledge is not all neutral. We assume that there is some kind of value or morality attached to what we learn. And so navigating that um, creates opportunities to think ethically and spiritually about the information that we receive. Adult learners are great at helping us think and rethink um, what we may have thought were just plain facts. Adults will, generally speaking, bring a readiness to learn. This is again part of that self-directed learning. They're on their own journey. They're choosing to be in this space. They may not have chosen that core required course, but they did choose to be in this space to learn. They are goal focused. Most of us pursue learning with a goal in mind, even if that goal is personal enrichment. They desire meaning and purpose in learning. I'm saying they, I mean we. Um, we are seeking, in many cases, immediate relevance. Um, I sometimes notice an impatience to get to the point of the learning in some of my teaching experiences. And that's fair, right? People are carving time out of their busy, over-scheduled lives where family, church, other coursework, um, ministry, community service, their own health and mental health challenges are all putting demands on them. And so if they're here for a reason, and they're looking for an immediate application in what they're learning. And that is often triggered by a real life need. They have a why, so there's a time sensitive sense of urgency often in what they want to learn and how they want to apply it in their life and work. I've lost track. I think this is okay. This is number 4, orientation to learning. Again, there's connection here with the previous one. They're more Adult learners tend to be more problem centered than subject centered. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule, but many adult learners have a problem they're looking to solve, or at least to address and explore, if not fix, right? They're looking for practical, real world relevance. They're seeking to learn what applies to their life and their work. And returning to that view of wanting to have a say in what they learn, they want options. They want to feel like they are directing their own learning. We can also expect in the adult orientation to learning that they will self-select what is most relevant and useful. That is hard in a traditional learning model where this is the core curriculum and you are responsible for all of it, right? When am I ever going to use this? Our children and youth say. And as adults, often our answer, even if under our breath, is, well, never again in your life after you finish your final exam. But in general, adult learners will say, this part of the coursework is relevant to me. I'm going to focus there. And some of my best professors, I found in my own doctoral work, left very intentionally a week or two of their syllabus blank. I don't know how that went over with the department chair, but as a student, as an adult learner, especially as an adult learner who was older than most of my peers in the program, I finished my PhD in 2023. I was older than some of my professors. But I really appreciated that because the professors were leaving space in the curriculum to focus on what the students demonstrated the most interest in. So one professor only allotted 1 week in the semester for women's voices, but people were really interested in learning more about women's voices. Or they only allowed 1 week for African and African American voices. But there was a strong interest in the classroom for more on that. And so they were able to expand the lesson plan by leaving that blank space in their syllabus. And I just thought that was a tremendous approach to adult learner-centered learning. We don't always have that luxury, 6-week intensive. I don't have that much flexibility, although in any given lecture, I do find myself leaning into the space where the most questions come. Fifth principle from Knowles is that adult learners are intrinsically motivated. It's less about the grades. It's less about getting into a good college. It's not about learning toward a standardized test, although there are some of us who are still very grade driven. I recently took it's an IDI. Somebody else might be able to help me out what that stands for. It was about intercultural competency. Inventory. They don't even call it a test, but I just felt mortified that I felt like I failed the test. Not surprising as a white person who grew up in a Eurocentric, not very diverse environment, no matter how much work I've done as an adult. And I didn't fail the test. I just didn't land on the inventory where I had aspired to land, right? So there are still some of us who are motivated by the grade. That's just my little confessional for you, even when it's not actually being graded. In general, however, adult learners are motivated by a lot of factors, and it's not just money. A lot of times we think of continuing education as a way to get the promotion, as a way to get that bump in the salary scale if your organization is structured in that way. My spouse works for the school district of Philadelphia, and when you get the master's degree, you get a bump. When you get the master's plus 30, you get a bump in the salary rating. When you finish the EDD, you get another bump. Sometimes that is part of the motivation for adult learners. Other times it's about personal enrichment. It's about, I want to be a better parent. I want to be a better family member. I want to be a better pastor. Sometimes it's about improving our own quality of life. It's about personal growth. Sometimes it's about job satisfaction. I was burning out in a really rich, wonderful career that I had built in publishing ministries, but I was burning out there. And I needed something different. And so a PhD program was part of my discernment process. It was a costly one in time, energy, and money, but it was immensely satisfying to me and allowed me to move into this new role where I have grown tremendously and experienced a different kind of quality in my own life. So all of these things, right? All right, can you tell we're shifting gears? Um, we all learn in different ways. This is where we shift from kind of adult learning theory to what's good for it. It's kind of like Legos, good for children 2 through 102. Actually, Legos are rather small for 2-year-olds. Please do not give Legos to your toddler children or grandchildren. Choking hazard. But in any case, when we talk about learning differences, learning styles, what's good in pedagogy is also good in andragogy. So one of my sources, and of course I put the footnote at the end, so I can't tell you what the source citation is right this moment, but I will be able to at the end. A learning style describes a preferred way of thinking, processing, and understanding information. So later on, we'll have you do an inventory, which is not a test. You can't fail. But it's a way of kind of assessing your own way of learning. So many of you may have already been exposed to some of these models. Again, we're relearning some things. But there are 4 common models that talk about learning styles and how learners differ in processing information. Some of them focus on who we are individually, neurologically. Some of them focus more on what we know naturally or learned. But also how we think, learn, and apply our learning. So these are the 4 main models. Grigori's mind styles, Dunn and Dunn's dimensions of learning, Gardner's, which may be the most familiar to many of us, multiple intelligences, and then Fleming's VARK model, which is where we will spend the most time because I find it to be the most accessible and practical in applied learning settings. So for the model of mind styles from Anthony Grigori, there are two key questions. The first is, how do I perceive and process information? And the second is, how do I organize information? So I will give you a concrete example. How do you organize your music or books or movies? Now, okay, this is going to show my age again. I still have a DVD collection. I've updated many to Blu-ray, but I do not collect my videos in an electronic form, although I have plenty of streaming services. How do you organize your shelves? Let's put it that way. Some folks, and it's apparently trending now, organize by color, the spine of the book. Some will organize by category. Some of us organize alphabetically, and my bookshelves are organized by author name as opposed to subject or title. And that's partly because in publishing, there were many more working titles than there were for any one project. Then author names tended to be more stable than titles. So that is part of why I organize that way. I'm offering a very concrete example of organizing information, right? In part because they're objects. But we can use the same kind of, I'm also talking about sequential ordering, right? How I organize it is different. When you take notes, do you take notes straight down the page, or do you create a mind map where you connect ideas? I've always been in the past, just take notes straight down the page until I started to learn about mind styles and learning styles. And I realized I actually really like drawing circles and lines to connect ideas. Other people would never be able to decipher my notes. It's not the best way to organize information for other people's distillation. But Grigori looked at how people mentally as well as physically organize and perceive information. So a lot of what he was doing was neurological. So it was also about mapping within the brain. Sherlock Holmes, anyone? He had his mind palace. I think it would be appropriate to say that his organization might have looked random to some, but there was a sequence for him in how he organized ideas in his mind palace. And he chose to do it in a concrete image for himself, right? So if Grigor is interested in mental organization and how that affects learning, Dunn and Dunn ask the key question, how is my capacity to learn influenced by diverse stimuli? So they're concerned about the learning environment and how it affects our ability to learn. So you see my little bee buddies here are falling asleep. And while that might be related to the chart behind them, if they're talking about analyzing numbers, it may also be because the room is too warm, because there's no air circulation. It may be because one of them has an infant at home who is not allowing mom, dad, siblings, grandparents, whoever, to get a full night's sleep. One of them may be struggling with some mental health challenges that makes focus really difficult. One of them may not have enough food in the refrigerator at home, and so is coming to the learning environment hungry. That's one reason It's insights from this kind of work that has created breakfast programs in so many school settings and free lunch programs, recognizing that children can't learn when they are hungry. Adults can't either. I mean, how many of you, well, you brought your lunch to this lunch and learn, right? um, so all of these different stimuli can affect our ability to focus, to learn, to process information, to be fully present in the learning community. And so being sensitive around those things hopefully comes more naturally to us as ministry leaders as well, right? Because we may be more attuned to those human factors. Um, and not assuming that just because you're in the lovely temperate Bay Area, that it's the right temperature for everyone all the time in the classroom. So asking, is it too warm? Is it too cold? Let's maybe address that distraction and enable our learners to learn a bit better. It's also a reason to encourage our online learners we invite you to be in a space where you can be here and nowhere else for at least a moment, for at least this hour. Um, is there somebody else who can watch the kids? Is there, in my case, a pet-free room where your cats will not be wandering through the Zoom window? um, these are factors that Done and Done take into consideration. Then there's Gardner, multiple intelligences. I have a former colleague who it was her pet peeve that Gardner has been used in ways that he never intended, which is true. I am not a Gardner expert, so I'm going to try to keep this simple and not make him say more than the basics of what I'm giving you here. Gardner's key question is, how am I smart? The assumption is that all learners are intelligent. We're all smart. But multiple intelligences get at how we solve problems. That's why these different types of intelligence we all have to varying degrees. But some of them we use to solve problems, and some of them we don't. Some of us will make our argument in very logical and mathematical ways. Others will make a case by appealing to your empathy or your intuition, right? Have you had those different conversations in a small group discussion where some folks are definitely relying on their strong verbal skills, and others are talking extravagantly with their hands and their volume and their physical expression. These are different types of intelligences that are different ways in which we solve problems. And there is a ton of information out there if you're interested in exploring more on any one of these. We are going to focus for most of the rest of this presentation on the VARK model from Neil Fleming. The key question that Fleming asked was, how do I best receive and express information? So how do I best learn? And how do I best teach or share information? And this is about a preferred mode of perception to a large extent. I like VARK as a model, one, because the assessment is free on the website, and two, because it's very easy and understandable. It's very accessible for most of us. VARK is an acronym that stands for visual, oral, read, write. So you got the RR sound, and kinesthetic. Um, visual visual folks really prefer visual depictions of information. So I was in a class last night with some of my colleagues here at ABHMS, and their slides were full of words. That is how I tend to design my PowerPoints as well. I put all my talking points on there. But I know that it's important to also illustrate with images, because some people respond more to an image, even if it's why is this bee that looks confused relevant to the VARK model, Rebecca? Um, it just makes things more interesting and engaging for folks. It also can be a way to engage people um, in understanding and processing information. So we're going to move on in just a few moments to look at that, examples of that from the VARK website. Visual learners tend to prefer graphs, maps. Don't tell me how to do something, show me how to do it, and preferably document it with diagrams step by step. Think IKEA, I suppose, and putting furniture together. Oral really thrive on hearing and talking. Oral learners love seminar style learning because they want to learn in a discussion group. Um, Oral learning also tends to be really appealing to adult learners broadly because they want to talk as much as they want to listen in many cases, right? Because they're not blank slates and they're not passive receptacles. We want to contribute. Um, Read-write learners. These are those of us who still love books. We still love writing essays. I would prefer to write an essay over create a video every day of the week and 3 times on Sunday. um, That is not true for everyone. Um, Whenever people give me information, I'm like, can you write it down? Can you email that to me later? Because just hearing it, I am unlikely to remember it. I joke and say I'm not a good listener, but in reality, it's more about being a read-write learner when it comes to receiving information. Kinesthetic learner, this was my youngest son. He learned with every sense in his body. He learned better in motion. In a therapy session, do not sit him down with a therapist at a coffee shop. They had to go for a walk. They had to shoot hoops. And then he could process the conversation, but only if he was in motion. And if he watched somebody dancing in a video, he would immediately stand up and mimic that choreography. He had that way of processing information. By Gardner's standards, he was smart with his body. Um, Everything he did came naturally to his physical body. Other areas of his body, not so much. Other parts of his learning, not so much. All right, I just threw a ton of information at you, probably at a high rate of speed, perhaps. That was a lot to process if you were not an oral learner. So I've seen a lot of messages hitting the chat. I did not let myself look at them. Melissa, Angie, any questions you want to bring into the room?
Looks like we don't have any questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
That could change.
That is fair. So one of the reasons I pause here, even if there aren't active questions, is because one of the things that we know about the human brain is that the human brain needs a break after 20 minutes or so. Even those of us who love a good lecture, and my boss, the Reverend Dr. Jeffrey Hagray, is one who is a trained philosopher and will let you know that and make no apologies for lengthy presentations and sermon, whether it's a sermon or a conversation in a staff meeting that he's presenting at. He makes no apologies for speaking at length without pausing for group discussion. Even those of us who thrive in that kind of learning, our brains need a break. This is why a good preacher will often repeat the information and preach in loops to give the brain a chance to review and to summarize and to process the information that has been received. So it's actually excellent teaching and learning technique to do the call and response especially in Black preaching, as well as the make the same point over and over again in 3 or 4 different ways. It's great reinforcement for adult brains as well as younger brains. And that's particularly good to know because the the length of time that we can be on the receiving end of information is shrinking because of our highly digital culture. So Wikipedia gives us small bites of information. News articles tend to get shorter. We're after the sound bite and the video clip as opposed to the lengthy documentary. And I say this as,
Hey,
go ahead.
Rebecca, while you were talking, we did get a question in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
From Eddie Dunbar, who says that Vark is familiar to him. It's what he's always seen, and he's curious why the others are not familiar, are not so common.
Yeah,
You have thoughts on that?
I
And then
do.
I'm just going to piggyback on what you just got done saying to all of us, and to just say we need to time check here too, and we've got about 12 minutes left.
Good to know. Thank you. I was thinking we had a full hour, so very good for me to know. Thank you. So, oh, you know what? That's because I lost my clock. Thank you. I'm looking at my timer instead of the clock. So yes, I think one reason that Vark is more familiar is because they've made it so accessible. Some might say it's dumbed down, but I think it's broken down in a really accessible, easy to remember way. Whereas the other learning theories you're generally only going to get if you're in an EDD program. You're only going to get if you're in educational theory classes. There are much more academic and scholarly framings for how we learn, whereas Vark is kind of a popular approach. There's still a lot of scholarship behind it, but as you'll see as I move on to my next slides much more quickly, it's just a lot more accessible model, and it has relevance for teaching as well as learning. So I'm just going to show you, these are actually screenshots that I've kind of cropped and put onto a single slide. This is how the Vark website presents their learning sheet for people who prefer to learn visually. Notice it's all images. There's a little bit of words on it, but mostly it's images. People who like Post-it notes, people who like lots of color and shapes and flowcharts, these are your visual learners. This one, I won't share the video, but the oral strategies page for people with oral preferences in their learning includes a video so that you can listen to the content. It is still a lot of words. It's not a lot of graphics, but it's very audio. It's a lot of audio. There's music. There's someone narrating the entire thing. And so this is a sheet and part of the website for oral learners. Then there's the read-write strategies page. It is literally words, the entire web page and the information sheet. It is all words. It's how we like to take in information. It's how we like to present information. This is the traditional classroom, right? In many ways that caters to read-write learners. The kinesthetic strategy page is another video, but in contrast with the oral learner video, the kinesthetic learner video, as you can see just from this screen grab, is people in motion, because kinesthetic learners use all their senses. They like a hands-on approach, and they like real-world application. So as you might imagine, kinesthetic learning is what a lot of adult learners bring to the classroom. A lot of what they have learned by living life kinesthetically. And then they bring it into a classroom where they're expected to process information in a primarily read, write, or maybe oral way, right? Um, so the VARC website itself caters to the type of learner who wants to learn about these strategies, and they show and don't just tell the differences among these strategies. So here's an opportunity for you, maybe not in this specific moment, but if you want to do the QR code, it will take you to the VARC-Learn website, and it will give you, there's a top menu that says questionnaires. There are a lot of ads on the page, which is partly how they make the questionnaire available for free. But full disclosure, I cannot vouch for the content of the ads. Please make sure you don't click on anything that you did not intend to click on. You can get your brief results. You see this free there, that will look pretty much like this at no cost. And there's a quiz right on the webpage. Feel free to select more than one answer for any question. When I took the test the first time, I had this strong read-write preference. Now that I've read the instructions a little more closely, ironically, the read-write learner did not read the directions closely enough, I am much more of a multimodal learner, I discovered, especially depending on what it is I want to learn. That's the other thing that we want to keep in mind in working with adult learners. Including learning ourselves, is recognizing that there's no one right way to teach and there's no one right way to learn. We all need different things in different moments of our learning journey. So, for example, when we do training on our new customer relations management system, Salesforce, if I don't have my fingers on the keyboard or on the mouse mimicking what they are saying I should do, plus preferably having the written instructions next to me, I am never going to learn how to use a new software. I have to be able to do it kinesthetically. Numbers, I really need to see in writing because I just don't speak numbers. So even when it's written down, I also like a visual graph to help me out, right? There's a reason I was an English major and then a theology master and doctor and not an accountant. I think I've talked long enough on this screen that you will at least be able to open up the web page even if you aren't actively taking the test yourself right now. So why don't I stop there? Because I want to see your faces. Oh, good. Most of you were hiding your video anyway. I wasn't missing too much. This is great. I'm just now seeing the chat as well. What questions do you have? What experiences have you had? You're an adult learners yourselves. What has something resonated with you? Has something like, I don't find that to be true. Maybe in your setting, in your with your audience, you experience these things differently. Yeah, Jim. Dr. Brenneman, sorry.
That's okay, Jim. I was wondering nowadays, maybe as we get older or as we become more digital, or as a young person. So I've taught in senior settings where the classes are like mini terms, 4 weeks,
Yes.
and in other words, they're munchable. And increasingly, it feels like perhaps either when you're younger or maybe when we're older or maybe always, what's your sense about sort of doing things in smaller doses, and then stacking them, maybe to create something? I just wonder, is there any notion as to time,
Yeah.
as it relates to learning from your thinking?
Yeah. The neurologists tell us that less is more. for brains of all ages, but especially young brains and aging brains, which is all of us, right? But the older we get, and the younger we are, attention span, the ability to process information. I think part of that is also related to adult learners. Our brains are constantly engaging and reacting to what we're hearing. We're not just receiving, we're interacting. Even when I'm not facilitating a class, my brain is engaging the information in a different way. So yeah, bite-sized, I like the munchable idea. Scheduling also plays a part. I know that with the Center for Continuous Learning, a commitment longer than 6 weeks, people are like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 6 days. I can't possibly make a 6-week commitment. So I don't know how you all are still doing it with a 14-week semester, right? I mean, because that's or a 3-year degree program, like that is a lot for people, which is why the 12-month, 9-month MBA programs, for example, are so, people are like, yes, 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 this is the scope that I can handle. But some of it's brain chemistry. There's no question some of it is how we're being socialized and conditioned by the 24-hour news cycle, by the way that information is delivered to us. You know, what's the chicken, what's the egg? It's both.
I think we have time for one more question, and we got one from Eddie Dunbar. And he
Yeah.
asked, are there models that are best for multimedia learners, especially with educational videos?
Yeah, so those are your video and oral learners, right? Visual and oral learners, sometimes kinesthetic learners as well. The trick with video learning is that it's not just a talking head, or you haven't really given much more to the visual oral learner than you would in a classroom setting, a live classroom setting. So often the best learning on video includes graphics, charts, bulleted lists, because some folks in your audience are also read-write learners. I've seen PowerPoints that are just images, and that is so frustrating to me as a read-write learner, because like I'm going to remember that beautiful or striking image, but I need the talking points to help me distill the information that I want to know. So multimedia is a good way to think about it, to try to appeal to multiple learning styles. It's that Pauline aspiration of trying to be all things to all people and really satisfying nobody at all anytime.
Thank you, Rebecca. We've come to kind of a natural place and time to begin winding down and make our announcements. Dr. Rebecca Irwin-Diehl, we're so grateful that you joined us today and shared with us. It's lovely to have some of our American Baptist partners in this ministry work to be connected and to share audiences. So we're very grateful that you shared your time and expertise with us today. And we are, in fact, all seeking to be excellent learners as well as facilitators. So this is really helpful. Before we log off, there are some announcements for the BST community. BST's annual convocation will take place this Monday, September 8th at 6 p.m. It will be hybrid, in person in the chapel on our campus if you are local to the Bay Area, as well as virtually on Zoom for those of you at a distance. This year's theme is Becoming Sanctuary, Holy Ground, Healing Space. And BST's president, Dr. Jim Brenneman, will bring the message. Melissa has put the Zoom link in the chat if you'd like to copy and paste that and save that somewhere until Monday evening. Please join us if you would for next month's First Friday Lunch and Learn on October 4th. Our guests that day will be Danny Tongsi and Reverend Deborah Lee from Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, who will share on the topic, No One Belongs in a Cage, Ending Immigration Detention. You won't want to miss this critical conversation. And the registration link is in the chat. If you know someone who's discerning a call to seminary, I sure hope you're referring them to BST. The monthly admissions webinars take place on the second Tuesday of every month. We have coming up one next Tuesday, September 9th, which will be led by the Dean, Dr. Leanne Snow-Flesher, and be an overview of BST programs. And then again, there'll be one in October focused on discernment. Leah Rochel, Director of Admissions, can answer any questions you might have. And finally, if you are looking for a moment of spiritual renewal and connection, join the BST alumni from around the globe for Soul Sanctuary, a virtual retreat for BST alumni on November 6th from 4 to 7 p.m. on Zoom. More details are on the website, and the link has been dropped in the chat. We're excited about the many opportunities coming this fall for connecting with the BST community. And so we hope you watch the BST bulletin for announcements and details about all of those. Thank you again for participating with us today, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care, everybody.